The recent global recession has had devastating effects on the entire world, but particularly on the European Union. Led by bank failures in the US, this recession rippled across the world, resulting in the failure of global banks and disastrous economic effects on many countries. As this cartogram clearly shows, by 2025, almost every country's GDP is predicted to go up significantly, except for the European Union. Cartograms are used to show specific differences in different places by changing the size and proportions of those places, therefore distorting them. The country of Greece, in particular, was especially impacted by the recession and became a symbol of the failings and struggles of the European Union and their enormous economic crisis. The serious debt that Greece and all other European Union countries have been facing is shown in this thematic map. The dark pink color that Greece and Italy are shaded shows that they are in critical condition and need reforms. Thematic maps are used to present one single theme. This map of the European Union is an example of data quality and relevance. While it attempts to show the current conditions of the countries in the European Union, it instead potentially confuses the viewer. The maker of the map probably thought the weather theme was quite clever, when in actuality it is very confusing when you first look at the map as to what kind of data it is going to tell you. After the recession hit and Greece's dire economic situation became apparent, the Greek government initiated austerity measures in order to secure an €110 billion loan. These measures would cut back public sector jobs that made up about 40% of the economy, as well as public social services. Government leaders also decided they needed to raise taxes, which upset the people, leading to many riots and other struggles between the government and its citizens. Out of frustration with the suffering of everyday citizens at the hands of these measures and the recognition that Greece is in a serious quest to find ways to survive the crisis, thousands of wealthy citizens of Greece are being outed by whistleblowers who charge that they are evading taxes in offshore Swiss accounts, while being protected by corrupt government officials accused of selectively applying the law at the expense of poor and middle-class Greeks. Due to these political and economic troubles that have often resulted in violence, people from other countries were made apprehensive about traveling to Greece and therefore found other travel destinations. This compounded the damage to the Greek economy as the travel industry made up a huge part of the money that flowed to Greece. As Greece was going under, most of the rest of the European Union was also struggling to stay alive. Ireland, Portugal, and Spain were having similar problems to Greece. Meanwhile, the countries of Belgium, Italy, and France were not far behind in their own struggles. During this time, the European Financial Stability Facility, or the EFSF, was created to help stabilize economies in the EU that needed help. This came in the form of an initial €440 billion bailout. These funds didn't end up being enough, though, as the countries that were doing well simply did not have enough funds to contribute. Thus, the bailout ended up only being less than half of what was initially hoped for. The only country stable enough to help was Germany, but they certainly didn't have unlimited funds. Germany and France were insisting on all of the countries in the European Union to participate in the creation of high taxes and low government spending. So far, the interest rates of government 10-year bonds are rising substantially in all European Union countries except for Germany. The stock prices in most European banks have dropped as well. Now, what effect does all of this have on us? The collapse of the economies of countries in the European Union has been and will continue to negatively affect the United States. First of all, this issue does not just relate to the country's debt. It relates to the failure of the euro. If the euro fails and all of the countries develop their own currencies, it will negatively impact the US dollar. Additionally, with all of the European countries in such crisis, the people do not have enough money to spend on unnecessary things. This negatively affects the exports of US companies such as GM, Ford, and Apple, all of whom have lost hundreds of millions of dollars in sales from Europe in the past year. When US products don't sell, American workers often don't work. This azimuthal or equidistant projection of the world shows all places in their true distances from the pole. It also shows us that we are all closer together than it seems. This all clearly relates to Tobler's law, which states, "Everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things." Even though the countries in the European Union are suffering more severely from their economic crisis because they are near each other, this crisis still affects other countries because everything is related to everything else. Greece has been the poster child for how out of control a nation's economy can be. Sparked by the collapse of banks whose prosperity had been built by government deregulation that resulted in risky, faulty investments and perpetuated by government corruption and tax evasion by the wealthy, Greek citizens, like all citizens of nations feeling the effects of recession, are the ones who feel the most pain. In piecing its economy back together to make its case that it should maintain its place in the European Union, it is the everyday citizens that have felt the greatest impact and stress through unemployment, drastic pay cuts, and gutted social services. While perhaps the most severe example, other nations around the European Union and the United States have found themselves engaged in similar struggles. One can only hope that once we have moved past this challenging moment in history, we will have learned our lessons.